Okay, I think we are all set to go. So far, I believe all of you know that the course itself will be in a modular basis where we have four different milestones, four different modules. Now we start off with JavaScript, move on to HTML, CSS, and so on. We'll see a more detailed slide on. But so far, if you guys have any questions before I begin, just let me know in the chat. I'm happy to answer. Okay, I guess there aren't any questions. Then let's begin. Right. Is my screen visible for everyone?
Yes.
Perfect, amazing. So what we will do is it's appreciated to keep the session as interactive as possible. So any kind of questions or comments, just let me know in the chat or by turning on your mic, however you feel more comfortable. So as I said before, today's lecture would essentially be talking about our first two milestones. In this case, it's JavaScript and HTML, CSS. If we take a look at the milestones, we start off with Introduction to Programming, which is essentially JavaScript. Now, the reason behind having JavaScript at the very beginning is so that later on, when we have a little more advanced, if not advanced, if we're using a lot more of JavaScript, you guys don't have any issues with being able to understand the lectures and do do the codes on your own. Okay, so yeah, we start off with JavaScript in the Introduction to Programming module. That itself is a milestone. Now, after the end of this module, a certificate will be due if you do wish to leave the course for any kind of reason. You will be leaving with a certificate on Introduction to Programming. If not, you move on to the next milestone, which is HTML, CSS. Now, by the end of this milestone, you will be able to create your own fully functioning website. Now, later on, we do have React and Redux, and then servers and databases. This React and Redux is essentially fine-tuning what you've learned and essentially learning tools and libraries that are used in the current job market. If you take a look at different job postings on Indeed or even LinkedIn, you'll see a lot of the front-end job positions have React in it. React, sometimes React and Redux. So these are very important when it comes to the job responsibilities of a front-end engineer. And then in order to complete the whole course, we have servers and databases, which will essentially teach you how to create a backend and connect it to your front end, turning in turning it into a full website for any organization or any kind of purpose. Because as we know, websites can be just the front end on its own, where we see websites like gaming websites or say a newspaper blog. those don't often require servers or databases. Databases are mostly required for websites that hold some kind of data. And after you're done with that, you will be able to call yourself a full stack developer. Now, from the screen, you can see there is a career transition module over there as well. Before we head on to graduation, over there, you'll learn a lot more about how to kind of transition into your career with whatever you've learned throughout the course. Any questions so far? Okay.
Yes,
Uh,
please.
Yeah, you have a question?
Yes. So all these modules are connected to each other, or just these are different? Like when we move to like HTML, CSS, so it will be different from the first one, or it it has some similarities with the previous programs. Like yeah,
So yeah, yeah. You can finish your question, I'll answer.
yeah, like introduction to programming, we will be learning JavaScript. Yeah.
Yep, correct.
So is there any similarity between HTML and CSS, or this is complete new thing we will be learning then?
So it's partly new, but then again, we will be using some JavaScript with HTML, CSS as well. We will see why later on in the lecture, why we need JavaScript with HTML, CSS. These modules, they're designed so that even though they're all connected, they're taught in a way that they are concepts of their own. So even if, say, you have prior knowledge on JavaScript, you just decide to start on HTML, CSS, you will be able to follow. But yes, to answer your question, these are kind of independent of each other, but they do have um, some concepts from the previous modules
Mhm.
that are needed in order to finish those modules itself.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? I have
Assalamu
a question.
alaikum, brother. I do have a question. Oh, go ahead, brother. You can go.
Yeah, no worries. Ask away.
The brother, he spoke first, so he can go.
Oh, I was gonna address a question that I have in the chat over
Oh, okay.
here. The question is Figma also included in the course? Yes, it is. Figma is actually a very important step into designing a website. So we will cover that as well. Yes, I believe, Naeem, you had a question.
Yes, yeah, I do have a kind of like a two-part question. So my first question is, well, first, I'm completely new to all this stuff, so some of the verbiage that you use, I'm not familiar with. I have a very basic understanding of it. So when you're referring to front end and back end in relation to what that looks like as far as skill set, what that would look like in the field of software engineering, or what other, I mean, of course, I know it probably comprises of many different types of things as far as roles go, but what is the basic gist of what each role, or each end, I should say, what someone does and how that basically works for them as moving forward with their career.
Yeah, definitely. So as we move forward in this particular lecture, you will get to know about a lot more about the modules that will answer your question in more detail. But for now, I can give you kind of a gist of what's happening. So
Okay.
front-end engineers are essentially responsible for creating the front end of the website, which is essentially the face of the website.
Mm-hmm.
And backend engineers, they usually work more with the knowledge of servers and databases.
Mm-hmm.
They work with the data handling, or as the name suggests, the databases of the organization or the
No.
project itself.
Okay.
Now, that being said, backend engineers do have uh, a few other responsibilities as well as they go on. But as
Mm-hmm.
a full stack developer over here, you will be learning how to make sure you can create the front end and the back end part as well, which will make you able to create an entire website on your own.
SubhanAllah. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That makes more sense.
Amazing. Yeah, yeah. So as we move forward, you'll see when you take a look into the course content, you'll understand a bit more about what these jobs or these roles are kind of required to do in the field. Because the whole entire course is designed so that it reflects what you would be doing in a job or working environment,
Hmm.
so that whenever you get yourself that job, you won't be completely blank on what to do, how to go.
Understood. So basically, there's a balance between educational and otherwise things that you would have to learn, let's say if you went to a school, and applicable information that you could use right away.
Yes, you are correct.
Perfect.
So, I mean, if you think about bachelor's degrees, they teach you a lot about computer science,
Hmm.
but as you move into or branch into different fields of computer science, you'll see there's a lot more required in your job postings than what you've learned exactly in your computer science
Exactly.
bachelor's.
Right.
Because yeah, let's face it, so universities, they try to teach you as much as they can, but they try to give you the basics so that whenever something new comes up, you can definitely pick it up on your own and go on from there. But yeah, so the main goal of our program is to make sure we bridge that gap between education and the job requirements and have you guys ready for your job from day one.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. I appreciate you.
Amazing.
All right.
We have another, sorry, let me look at the chat for some questions now. So we have a chat that says, are we going to learn version control system like Git? Yes, we will be using GitHub quite a lot. And that does have the version control aspect to it. We will, well, this time on, we are actually planning on making Git a little more important throughout the whole course rather than just say the assignments. We try to incorporate it to say the homeworks and daily classworks as well. Because let's face it, GitHub is one of the most important tools that you'll be using in any kind of software jobs. Then we have, are we going to learn how to program systems? Well, in this version of the course, we are essentially just focusing on the web-based softwares that we have and whatever that requires. Sometimes it requires a little bit of programming depending on what kind of project you're making. If it's a gaming website, you would have to create the game itself using JavaScript and then somehow link it to the website itself. I hope that answers your question. But yeah, for this one, we are solely kind of focusing on the web-based softwares that exist. Okay, so any other questions on these? If not, we can then proceed to the next slide. Okay, you guys have no more questions. Let's proceed. So now let's try to think about a web page, right? So if so let's talk about this first, okay? This is a website, a very common website. We all know YouTube. And then we have Twitter, then we have Facebook. Now, all these websites, they have one thing in common, how they are made. So in general, for a web page, we require three components. One, HTML, two, CSS, three, JavaScript. Each of these components have their own responsibilities. If we take a look at this diagram or image over here, this kind of talks about what each of these components do for not just a website. Well, in this case, we are using a real life example just to give you guys an idea of what it does for a website. But hopefully you guys can relate to what we're trying to convey over here. So to start with HTML, HTML is basically giving a structure for the actual page. CSS gives you the look of the page with styling, colors, and everything. And JavaScript gives you the functionalities that a website needs. For example, say button clicks, or say going from one page to another, then maybe some kind of animation. There could be a countdown timer on your website. A lot of different possibilities, a lot of different websites that can be made. But if you look at this example, HTML in this case is essentially creating the structure of the car. CSS is giving its color, maybe if there's a design on the body of the car or something. And JavaScript is giving it the functionalities where it can actually move or complete the tasks it's required to do. Any questions so far? Okay. So moving on. Now let's take a look at this website and try to understand what kind of components are used here, right? So we know there's HTML, there's CSS, there's JavaScript. Now let's try to understand what's required where. So HTML, as we know, it gives you a structure for the website itself. Now, for a website, what can a structure look like? A structure can look like the text, and then essentially the contents that will be inside the website. For example, if you take a look at this picture, the HTML component would contain, say, these writings: home, about, services, contact, then this logo, this button, then these texts as well. Oops, I think yeah, these texts as well, and then the image too. But as you can see in this image over here, or this template, it's all very well put together. If it's just the basic HTML structure, there's a good chance everything will be stacked one after another. We'll see later on when we get to the HTML section of the lecture for today. But for now, we can sort of imagine what it would look like. It would essentially just be the text and the images. It wouldn't be as put together. For example, this image wouldn't be behind these texts. It would just be another component or another element under these texts, just as a straight horizontal column. They'll just stack one over another. But as we add CSS, everything starts coming together. Colors change, then the positioning of each element is where we want it to be. For example, this, if it was horizontal, just stacked one over another, it turned into, wait, I think I made a mistake. Vertical, sorry. This was stacked vertical, one over another. Using CSS, we can turn this into a horizontal line where these are much better spaced and much better placed as per our requirements. and the colors as well. As you can see, the button over here has a nice reddish color with a white text. If it was a basic button, it would just be what the HTML, um, what what can I call it? The stock button that it provides. It would just be like a gray button without any design, just text. Not very pretty. But with CSS, we can change anything into anything we want. And over here with CSS, we put this image that we see over here behind this text as a background, giving it a more professional look rather than something that just looks like a structure. Now, when it comes to JavaScript, so far we understand what HTML and CSS is kind of doing, right? We get the idea. Any questions? Okay, let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm happy to answer. Then we have JavaScript, right? JavaScript, what does this do? As we've heard before, JavaScript gives a website its functionality. So in this case, maybe these navigation bar texts over here, they wouldn't likely be clickable, right? They'd just be text. But with the help of JavaScript, we can give these texts functionality, as in whenever I click on about, we can redirect this page into another page that has the about section or the about page in general. Then there's a lot we can do. We can add animations. We can have this image, the image of this person over here pop in and out, like vanish for a second and then come back again after a second. We can do a lot of things with JavaScript. But in this website, from what it looks like, it's very simple. Not a lot of JavaScript used. It's just the basic dynamic functionalities of a website. That's all it is for now over here. Any questions? Okay, take out the question in the chat. Does that mean HTML is always performed before CSS? Yes, you are correct. You can think of it this way. In human terms, first come first comes our skeleton, then comes our look, how we're gonna look on the outside, and then our functionalities, say talking, moving, uh, eating, listening, all these things. These are essentially our motor functions, seeing, hearing, smelling. So in terms of a website, the HTML bit is the skeleton, CSS is what gives it the looks, and JavaScript is what gives it the functionality. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so moving on. Right. Intro to program, our first module with its own milestone at the end. Now, intro to programming would essentially be all about JavaScript. Now, the reason behind it is JavaScript is a very strong language and it's used for multiple purposes. In our course, we will be using it mainly for web-based solutions, but it does have other uses as well. Now, what is JavaScript? JavaScript is a high-level interpreted programming language that enables dynamic behavior and activity on websites. It is often called a scripting language because it is mostly used to write scripts that run in the browser or server. As I said, JavaScript is mainly used to turn a website dynamic and interactive. And as you can see over here, it's also sometimes called a scripting language since it's basically creating scripts that run in the browser or server. Now, the history behind it is it was created in 1995 by Brendan Eich for Netscape. Originally, it was called Mocha, later renamed JavaScript. Now, these are a bit of history. That's good to know, but it's not really something that would probably come up in your job interviews, but it's good to know where these languages are coming from. So ECMA script, standardized specification for JavaScript, modern version ES5, ES6, ES 2020 have brought significant improvements. JavaScript is often misunderstood because of its name, but it is not related to Java because it is a separate language on its own. This is a question that people using JavaScript to make applications get a lot because it does have the name Java in it. So a lot of people confuse it to be something derived from Java or something related to it, but it's pretty different. It's not really something that's affiliated or related to Java. So usage. So for front end, it enables client-side interactivity and manipulation of HTML, CSS. What that means is when we say client-side, we're essentially talking about the front end, the part that your client will be able to see. And then we have the server side, which is essentially the back end, which only the backend developers are working. So JavaScript, initially it works on the client side interactivity as we talked about in one of the previous slides where it's giving the website a more dynamic dynamic look, giving it more interactive functionalities, making it a very user-friendly, giving it a very user-friendly look in general for the website. We have a question in the chat. What is the difference between vanilla and other kinds of JavaScript? Well, JavaScript has different versions coming out, but mostly I think the vanilla JavaScript is used because it's the basic form of JavaScript. The others have slightly different, I'd say small tweaks here and there, but pretty much they're the same, not a lot of difference. Then we have JavaScript is a script programming language on the browser, but Java is a programming language on JVM. Yes, you're correct, Wazir. Yeah, this is something that people who haven't worked with JavaScript tend to confuse when asked about or when they hear about JavaScript. So, okay, we talked about the front end bit of what JavaScript does. It makes the website interactive and more user friendly. For backend, through Node.js, JavaScript can be used on the server to build scalable applications. Node.js, you'll see, is very important when we start working on the server side of a website. It has a lot of libraries that we can use to make our tasks much easier. It's essentially a very key component of learning databases. Then we have mobile and desktop. JavaScript is used for cross-platform development through frameworks like React Native and Electron for desktop. I don't know if how many of you know the Facebook and Instagram applications, they're actually made with React Native. And it's very powerful. It it gets rid of a lot of extra work and extra rendering, I would say, because then you would have to create the application separate for both iOS and Android, making it kind of hectic. But React Native, what it does, it helps you create a cross-platform application that's usable for both iOS and Android, making it much easier for developers to create functioning applications for different operating systems. So that was it for the usage bit. Any questions so far? Anyone, any questions? Just let me know. Let's take a pause over here and try to take in what we've heard so far.
Yeah, so I have a question about the JavaScript.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
is there any specific reason that we select this language? Because there is other language as well. So what's the reason behind only focusing on JavaScript for this?
There are other languages as well. For example, for backend, you can also use PHP. But the reason behind JavaScript being used so in such a large, what can I say, in such a large usage basis for every single company is because JavaScript has not only ability to be used in the back end, but also in the front end. And then, as you can see over here, it can be used for mobile applications as well. It's more scalable. It requires, it gets rid of the extra learning curve for other languages when using other, say, technologies, and it increases productivity for companies.
Okay.
Okay, hope that answers your question.
Yes, thanks.
To piggyback on what you're saying, Aki, so what you if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying that JavaScript is basically the baseline foundation for learning other coding languages?
Um, Not necessarily.
Hmm.
So JavaScript does have a lot of the same characteristics as other programming languages. The thing about programming languages is that once you learn one, you can crack down the rest easy.
Right.
Say you start off with Java, you
They're
can easily,
transferable.
yeah, because they pretty much have the same concepts, you know? It's
Hmm.
like learning languages, real life languages, say English, French, Spanish. These languages, they have the same basic grammar rules, right? Past tense, present tense, and then all the other good stuff that you have while speaking a language. The only thing that
Hmm.
changes is how we are speaking it. So it's kind of like that. The basics of programming, it remains the same. What changes is how we are essentially writing the language.
Understood.
But yes, JavaScript has its benefits because of its versatility, I would say, as it's as you can use it for many different technologies. It's scalable in one word. That's why a lot of companies prefer that over languages.
Will this be the only programming language that we're learning during the course?
Yes, this will be the only programming language you'll be learning throughout the course. This should be good enough to get your head start in web dev at least. But the way we are going to teach JavaScript is from the very basic. So even if you want to learn a different language on your own, I believe you will be able to do that
Inshallah.
because you have all the basic knowledge of programming. To
Hmm.
start off, we try to teach you programming rather than the language itself. That way, like I said, if you want to learn something else, you can use the same concepts to learn the other language as well. So definitely this will be amazing.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We will go to the chat for some questions. So Sish says question. In the lecture yesterday, they said we would get an email to register in Canvas. Okay, so the Canvas register link would be sent to you guys very soon. We're still kind of working on setting up some small stuff on Canvas. And as soon as we're done with that, we'll send you guys the link to join. Then we have another question. JavaScript, mobile and desktop. We can say it's front end. Yeah, you can say it's front end. So you can say it's client side. So client side essentially represents what the user will be seeing. And when it comes to backend or server side, it's a little different. Now we have this in a separate section on its own for mobile and desktop. It's because web applications and mobile and desktop applications, they work a little different in terms of building it, but pretty much most of it remains the same. Hope that answers your question. Any other questions so far? Any questions? Related, unrelated, any questions? Okay, amazing. So moving on, Visual Studio Code. So this is what we will be using for our entire course. Visual Studio Code is a very versatile IDE, which is essentially a integrated development environment. This will work for HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then it can run Node.js, and it has a lot of different functionalities too. It's very useful. And this is something most developers use these days. I believe you guys did have a setup lecture, didn't you, last week? I'm not wrong.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, so I guess you guys know about Visual Studio Code then and how it works. So yeah, this is okay. So if you haven't, then I believe the lecture recordings are gonna be up on the YouTube channel. You can take a look at that as well. But also, we could send an email to us if you haven't finished registration. Let me rephrase that. If you haven't finished installing all the softwares yet, do send us an email and we can send you the link to the YouTube video, or we could probably schedule an office hour or something to talk about it. But I believe the lecture recording itself will be very helpful. Okay, so this is what it will look like, the interface when you just begin. If you have recent projects, it will be over here. You can create new file, open a previous folder. It's also Git integrated, so you can actually run Git commands through Visual Studio Code, but also you could run Git commands through the terminal as well. You have both the options available. Now, when I'm talking about terminal, what is terminal? Or some might also know this as the command prompt. So on Mac, if you look it up, it's called terminal, and for Windows, it's called command prompt. What this is essentially, we need this for running GitHub or Git bash commands, and essentially running some node files as well. Terminal is basically you giving direct commands to the computer. So there are different ways you could write these. For example, you could straight go to the terminal itself or the command prompt, or Visual Studio Code has its own built-in terminal that you could use to write down the commands over there. Okay, so finally, terms. I believe during the interviews, we did have some questions about the terms that will be used throughout the whole course. Some might seem a little advanced, but worry not, these terms, they're not really something that we will be using completely out of the blue. They'll be all related to the lectures itself. So whatever we will be talking about will be from the lectures with its own definition and everything. So hopefully you won't have a issue following those the terms that we use when we move on to the next lectures. If you do, definitely ask us. We're happy to help. Or you could even take a look at the previous day's slides. Those should have those explanations as well. In the chat, I see. What was the question? There wasn't really a question. I was just talking about the terms that we will be using. For example, say variables, parameters, things like this. These aren't really technical terms like that. These are more terms related to the programming language itself. So when we go ahead and learn the bits of coding, we will have definitions for these terms and what they represent. So later on in the coming months, when we use those terms, you won't have an issue understanding. Me bringing this up is because we did get quite a few questions about what kind of terms we would use and everything throughout the course. So yeah, all terms, all technical terms that we use will be based on the lectures. And if you have an issue, definitely ask. If you don't understand what something means, you can definitely ask us, or you could even check out the previous day's lecture. Those should have, if not the previous day's lecture, the related lecture, those will definitely have a proper definition as well for those terms, and hopefully it will clear out all of your confusions. So yeah, that's about it for the intro to programming part. We will be going through all the basic concepts of JavaScript, going through sample problems, essentially learning how to code, learning how programming itself works. And by the end of this module, you will be able to create your own JavaScript problems, solve your own JavaScript problems, and if you want, you can even learn different languages as well, since our approach is more about teaching you programming rather than JavaScript alone. So yeah, it's always good to learn in a way where later on you can scale your knowledge and learn something new to make sure you're up to date with the job market. So yeah, any questions so far? Any questions about the first milestone?
Yeah, I have a question. I heard there's like different types of JavaScript, like vanilla, and they call the other one normal Java. Is there a difference in the
There's not a lot of difference in those JavaScript versions. They're pretty much the same. Probably they have like a different library for a different purpose. But over here, I think we will be using vanilla JavaScript.
vanilla?
That's the most, yeah. That's the most basic one that everyone uses.
Thank you. And if you could spend more time on that, that'd be lovely. Because from what I heard, that's the most needed,
Um,
and you need to be perfect in one language, or you try to switch
sorry,
or learn another.
you're cutting off a little. If you
Right?
could, speak up a little. Sorry,
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
understand.
I was to spend from my experiences from people that asked question about those. They said I need to spend more time on one specific programming language, JavaScript, before trying to learn one. So if we could spend a little time on that, that would be really
Yeah, definitely. So I think we're spending the most time on JavaScript rather than the other modules of the course. JavaScript has the most time allocated to that because we ourselves throughout the course will be needing JavaScript in a lot of different places, and it's important that all of you have a good hold of the language so that later on you wouldn't have issues understanding, say, node modules and everything when they come. So yeah, we will be spending quite a lot of time for JavaScript. In the chat,
thank
I
you.
see. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So in the chat, I can see we'll be traveling in December to Jan, so I might be buying JavaScript. So we are still trying to kind of adjust the pace with the Christmas holidays coming up, and we're trying to find a good middle ground so that everyone can catch up and still have a really good understanding of JavaScript before we move on to HTML and CSS. But in any case, if you do miss out on some of the JavaScript lectures, the lectures will be recorded. You can definitely catch up on your own time. And if you have questions, we do have labs and office hours. You can definitely drop by those. Any other questions? What are the specific AI tools we are going to learn each module? Oh, okay. So that's a good question. We will actually talk about a AI tool in module 2. Module 1, we're keeping it as simple as we can because we want you to learn the basics of programming and JavaScript so that later on, even if you're using AI tools, you can understand what's happening in the code rather than, blindly believing what the AI tool is suggesting or doing for you. But yeah, in this module, HTML and CSS, we will talk about a AI tool that's very helpful when it comes to creating websites or even JavaScript codes, to be honest. So yeah, we will look at that in a bit. Any other questions? Okay. So if you have no more questions, let's proceed to the next milestone. Before we do, let's take a 2-minute break and we'll come back for the next module, which is the HTML and CSS. Okay, so let's begin. Now we will talk about the second milestone, which is HTML and CSS. Okay, so for this part, we will be learning how to essentially make the front end or the face of the website itself using HTML and CSS. But later on, we will move on to JavaScript to give that website dynamic functionalities or make it more interactive. Now, steps of designing. To start with, we have Figma. This is very important because wireframing is essentially step one for any kind of application design, be it web applications, mobile applications, or desktop applications. Wireframing is very important. And when it comes to wireframing, Figma is a very useful tool used almost everywhere. And currently, it is very trending in the job market as well. Any kind of company, they'll be using Figma to create random designs or wireframes. I do have a question in the chat. How much longer is it going to get? So we don't really have a lot left. We're just going to talk about these 3 points essentially, and then which AI tool we'll be using for this particular module, say 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Okay, so Figma, a very important part of designing. Then we move on to the main designing part, which is HTML, creating a structure for the website itself. And once the structure is made with HTML, we can go on to CSS to give it a look or make it look the way we wanted in the Figma design. Now, over here we can see a small description of what Figma is and sort of screenshot of the interface of Figma. It says Figma is a web-based interface design tool that allows designers and developers to collaborate in real time. So this collaboration aspect is something very important when you're working as a group. And that's why Figma is so commonly used rather than other designing platforms. So once we're done designing something on Figma, we move on to HTML. Over here, we can see 2 images, one with a basic structure of what a HTML code looks like, and another a look of how it would look when you have it on the browser itself. So you can see it's HTML, the language, it's pretty much tag based. Over here, we deal in tags rather than the conventional programming language, what do you call it? Rather than the traditional programming language rules and traditions. It's a little different, and it's mostly used for just designing purposes. It has no other purpose than designing or creating the structure of the website. JavaScript, you have a lot more uses than languages like HTML. And on the right, you can see there's an image of what it would look like when it's put on a browser. Okay, you can see there's a question. Will there be a link for Figma? Figma is free to some extent. It's not entirely free. You can do your basic designing over there. But I think when it comes to templates and other stuff, Figma requires paid version. As for will there be a link for Figma? Figma, you could use it with just the free version that Google provides. The one that you can log in with your Google account. I hope that answers your question. If not, definitely ask. Okay, perfect. So yeah, over here you can see on the left a basic HTML code. As you can see, it's a tag-based language, different from other ones. And on the right, you can see how it would look like on a browser. As I was talking about earlier, it's kind of stacked one over another when it is displayed on a browser, just the HTML itself. It looks pretty simple, pretty basic. It doesn't even look like a website, to be honest. But when we go to CSS and we write down codes like this, so we'll go into details when we learn the CSS and HTML bit itself, but for now you can have an idea of what it looks like from here. This is what a basic CSS file would look like. And after everything is done, you would end up with something like this. So right now, it would look like this with just HTML, but after adding the CSS code, it would look something like this, where it has more structure, better design, and everything is in place. Everything is how you wanted it to be based on the wireframe that you made on Figma. So as we're done with CSS, we will move on to adding functionality with JavaScript, where we will make the website dynamic, where we will make it more interactive, we'll make it clickable. And yeah, if you want, you could add animations as well. JavaScript, it has a lot of different functionalities. So we will definitely learn all those during the HTML CSS module. Now, after all that is done, we will talk about how to code smarter. Now, coding everything from scratch is all good, and it definitely builds your basics so that you can write or understand any kind of code. But times are changing with AI becoming more powerful every day. It's important for us to adapt as well to be more efficient. So in this segment, we're going to talk about Cursor. So Cursor is another IDE. It actually takes up the look of Visual Studio Code, but this has different AI models integrated to that, be it ChatGPT, be it Llama. It has quite a few AI models integrated. What it does is it has a chat option on the side where you can chat with the AI model, and the AI model gives you suggested changes which you can accept or you can reject. Or you could ask the AI model to make the changes for you, make specific changes for you, and all you have to do is just accept and your work is done over there. But these are risky because if we blindly use softwares or tools like this, what happens is we do end up with a product, but sometimes it's not exactly what we wanted because AI might be strong, but AI doesn't really give us the exact answer we need every time. So when you're working with a complex website, there's a 80 to 90% chance you won't come out with exactly what you're looking for. Maybe something similar, but not exactly the same. And when you're creating a program or a software, in this case, a web application for your client, the client would expect your work to be exactly the same as the wireframe design that you showed your client, because that's something you showed just to give your client an idea of what the product will look like, right? So your product should reflect that as well. So in that case, you will need to understand what's happening in that code in order to make specific changes, or in order to guide the AI model to the right direction. In the chat, Alim has a comment. We will also be asking you detailed questions about the code. We will know if you used AI to do things without full understanding. Yes, so even though we do encourage understanding how to use AI and standing out among the rest, during the course, we do require full understanding of your work that you submitted. So we ask questions from random places of your code, and you will be expected to answer them properly. If not, then it's hard to kind of assess, about whether it was mostly done with AI or it was basically your own effort. So it gets a little challenging in that area. So we do ask very thorough questions. Cursor. So in the chat, I have cursor like Replit. I'm not really familiar with Replit. Okay, from the looks of it, I think it's a little different than what Replit is. So Cursor is essentially an AI-powered coding environment. And what Replit looks like from here is it's an automated web developer. It's a little different than Cursor. Cursor just essentially takes away the work of going back and forth with ChatGPT, to be very honest. It's like it bridges that gap. So next question we have, when should we use AI? You should use AI when you're confident you can make the applications on your own. Yeah, so if for the projects, ideally, no. If we do expect you to use AI, we will let you know in the project descriptions, but the projects themselves are pretty much, you have to do it from scratch, because over there we are testing your ability to create the programs on your own and to test your understanding of what you've learned so far in the course. So during the projects and assignments, it will be mostly you doing the projects from scratch. But if there is a project that we want you to use AI, or where we want you to take the help of AI, we will definitely let you guys know in the project description. So another comment in the chat. In Curse, you have two options: ask inside the code, ask in the chat. Yes, you have those, and then also Cursor gives you code suggestions as well. Say you are trying to write down a code. You know how sometimes when you're writing an email on the Gmail app or Gmail web application, if it's a very common phrase, it just gives you it gives you a suggestion that you can just press tab and it just fills it up. So Cursor does the same actually. It gives you suggestions where you could just complete the whole code with one tap, or that part of code with one tap. So it's very useful. But like I said, AI isn't always very accurate. So it's important to be able to code on your own so that you can make changes to whatever version AI provided you with, or you can steer the AI model to the right direction. to give you the exact outcome you were looking for. So by the end of these modules, you will have a good hold on JavaScript. You will learn how to create a website, and you will be able to make it dynamic. And of course, there's the AI bit as well, but these are some takeaways that we want you guys to have from the modules itself. Because based on these, essentially, how good of a hold you have on JavaScript, how well you have learned to create a website, and your ability to make a website dynamic, these are the criterias we will essentially be grading you on. These are the things that you will essentially need when you are creating a project on your own. Now, that's pretty much it for milestone or module 1 and 2. Anyone, any questions about what we've talked about this session? Any comment or any unrelated question either is very much welcome, and I'm happy to answer right now. No questions? Okay. Okay, if it's all good, then I do have a question in the chat. When do we get credits? Do we get credits when we graduate? So when you graduate, you get the certificate with the logo of the Canadian government and digital supercluster on it. I'm not entirely sure what you mean by credits.
What they mean when they say credits is that if we are to apply to college or university, maybe the course we took from the coding colors could be used as the course and could help with reducing the payment uh, or even when we apply it could be as a backup for us and it would increase our ability to be accepted in those institutions.
Oh yeah, definitely. So you can definitely add this to your resume. It's like any other course that you take with BrainStation or Lighthouse Labs. You could definitely add this to your resume and talk about what you've learned or the tools that you have learned during this course. That should give you quite a lot of credibility on what is going on.
Yeah, but how about if some of us want to continue our education, university or college? Would it, uh, would it be helpful for us if we input it in our let's say papers indicating that and could basically lower the price of the course that we take since we already took them, or you know those kind of stuff.
Okay, so I think I understand you. So what you mean is whether you would be able to include this or get your college courses waived based on this program or course. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
Okay, so unfortunately that won't be possible as of yet. We are still working on getting that accreditation, and soon we will be able to make that happen for sure. But as of now, that isn't an option. But this is more of a professional certificate rather than a academic that you can, show for colleges and schools. Does that answer your question?
yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions? Okay. If you guys can't think of any questions now and you think about a question later on, definitely send us an email through support@codingincolor.org. We are happy to answer it over there as well. But then again, tomorrow at 12, we do have another session where we will talk about the other two milestones, which is module 3 and 4, which would be React Redux and servers and databases. So yeah, till then, thank you everyone for joining in. Hopefully this session was productive. And again, any kind of questions, definitely ask through support. We are happy to answer. For tomorrow's session, it's 12 p.m. PST. All right, thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys again tomorrow.